Welcome back, guys. I trust you're fine. This is just a quick update on the Lucas Richard Jessica Lloyd case currently unraveling in Liberia in Africa. If you are not familiar with the details of this, just go back to my playlist. I have the first two videos on this case. The first one gives an introduction and an in-depth review of the details of how Lucas Richard, the American missionary, came to meet Jessica Lloyd and what transpired therein, he being married and what he decided to do with her, and how things went south and the decisions that Lucas Richard took, which of course were very ungodly in that regard. And also the fact that he was a missionary who was here in Africa to spread the word of God, but ended up spreading the legs of another woman, although he himself was a married man. The details are in there, the decisions he took, the actions he took, allegedly, of course, to try and get rid of Jessica Lloyd before leaving the country, and how he got apprehended. Everything is in there. And then you find a second video giving an update of what has transpired after the first video came out. This is the third video, and this is going to give you an update of what has transpired after where the second video ended. Now, the second video ended with Lucas Richard giving his testimony after he had been arrested. But now, things have escalated further, and Lucas Richard has his back against the wall. Literally, he has his back against a wall of a prison, or let me say of a jail for now. As it stands now, just over 24 hours ago, the American missionary Lucas Richard is in deep waters with regards to his case involving what he tried to do to the Liberian national by name Jessica Lloyd. Now, he has been charged with two different charges. The first is attempted murder, and the second is aggravated assault. All of these perpetrated against Jessica Lloyd, the victim. It doesn't end there. Lucas Richard has been singled out for a single focused national protest against himself, his actions, and then the Creekside Church, which he's affiliated to. I'll get into the Creekside Church and how they play out in all this, and what is also transpiring with regards to their affiliation or association with Lucas Richard as a Christian missionary and they as a church, and how some angry citizens of Liberia are channeling their venom to the church as well. Now, the cries for justice for Jessica Lloyd has really increased since my last video on this case, and I'm surprised actually it's getting to this extent. Not to say that they don't need to cry for justice for her. No. I am confident to an extent that there will be justice for Jessica Lloyd. Whether it will come from the Liberian government or it will come from the American government or a consensus between the two, I don't know, but I believe some way, somehow, there's going to be justice. But the whole thing has escalated to a level where it's becoming like a national issue, where some people on social media are expressing concerns about the fact that some of these so-called missionaries allegedly come to Africa and try to take advantage of the vulnerable like Jessica Lloyd. And most often than not, they tend to get away with it because of either the money or power they have or the connections they have. So, be it that this case has come out to the point where the American missionary, Lucas Richards, has been caught red-handed, so to speak. It seems people are ready to vent all the pent-up anger and disappointment and bitterness they have or they may have had about previous cases involving foreigners and channel everything onto this case. And it puts Lucas Richard at a very bad spot. Some would say he deserves it. I don't know. I know he deserves to face the law, but it's as though he has now been positioned, unfortunately for him, and fortunately maybe for Jessica and other prospective victims of other people like Lucas Richards, at a corner where he's going to bear the grudge, he's going to bear the venom of all these angry citizens in Liberia who are ready to storm a massive protest against Lucas Richard and the Creekside Church, scheduled to take place at 10 a.m. on the 24th of September 2023. And do you know where the venue would be? It is alleged that it's going to be at the forecourt of the Creekside Church compound in Urbandale, Liberia. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. And as at the time of making this video, Lucas Richard has actually been charged and he was sent to the Monrovia Central Prison after the St. Paul Bridge Magistral Court ordered him to be sent to jail, awaiting what would follow thereafter. So they have actually taken him on now. The charges have been leveled against him, charge of aggravated assault, the charge of attempted murder. These two charges have been leveled against him, and he has been ordered by the magistrate court to be sent to the prison, to the jail, pending what will follow thereafter. If you look at what has transpired and the proceedings that are to be instituted against him legally, coupled with the fact that, on the 24th of September, there's going to be a massive protest on the compound of Creekside Church in Liberia against the church and Lucas Richard, and also voicing out and crying for justice for Jessica Lloyd, I think that it puts everything against Lucas Richard. I don't know how this case will go during trial. If there's going to be a jury, I think that the jury most likely or possibly could have already been influenced by the circumstances surrounding this case, especially with the sensationalism that is out there and the anger, the pent-up anger that is running through some of the citizens, and that they are expressing this openly on social media and also in person. So I don't see anything that might come in to sort of exonerate Lucas Richard, or at least give him some leeway for a lesser punishment. I'm afraid for Lucas Richard, although I think that if he's guilty, he has to definitely face the law. But I think that the law also says that people are presumed innocent until found guilty. But in this case, it looks like the public or the court of public opinion has already tried and condemned Lucas Richard. And I'm hoping that the legal process will not be influenced by the court of public opinion's influence, such that the case will be tried on its merits and evidence, and justice will play out the way it's supposed to play out, irrespective of whether he was a foreigner and the victim was a Liberian national, or it was whether it was a case between two Liberian nationals. I hope you appreciate the analysis I'm making, because it's important. There are two versions of the story out there, and the victim has spoken. Her story seems to lean more on the fact that Lucas Richard had something up his sleeve. I don't know if it's been confirmed whether there was something toxic in her blood, confirming that Lucas Richard had drugged her. If all these things come into play, these are evidences that will prove that Lucas Richard most likely had something up his sleeve and was trying to do what the commercial motorcycle rider said he saw him doing. But I'll leave that to the police and the courts to decide. This is how things have gone so far. But then, it doesn't end there. We go over to the Creekside Church, and that is where it also escalates further. Now, why do I say this? This is because the Creekside Church seemed to have positioned itself, unfortunately, at an angle in this communication that is now coming back to bite it in a very unfortunate position. What did they do? When the case first broke, this was the Facebook post that the Creekside Church put out. This was what they said: "Please pray for Creekside supported missionaries Lucas and Lois Richard. Lucas was attacked and robbed in Liberia today. His phone and money were stolen and their vehicle damaged. We'll add more details as we learn them. Thank you. That post came at a time when there was already a narrative and alleged eyewitnesses out there saying that Lucas Richard was actually caught in the act trying to slit the throat of Jessica Lloyd, and they had to apprehend him. So he then came, after he had been arrested, he then came out to say to the police that it wasn't that way and that those guys were rather trying to rob him. Now, this is a two-sided narrative, and at the point of this issue, we couldn't readily determine what was what. So you would expect that investigations will play out to confirm what the truth was. But the church coming out to say this seems to have already taken the side of Lucas Richard. And as is expected, the citizens would not be happy, given that one of them is actually the alleged victim of what Lucas Richard is accused of being caught red-handed doing. And I think this is where we need to have a conversation about how quick some institutions and some people are to align themselves with those they call their own, or those they have a relationship or an affiliation with when there is an issue, in order to sort of use their influence, maybe, to push the narrative that supports the person that they have that relationship with. And I think it's a very unfortunate thing, because when these things begin to happen, it begins to seem like if you're a victim and you don't have any powerful institution or person pushing your narrative, then you become a liar, even though you're actually a victim. And that is how some people in Liberia are feeling towards the Creekside Church. They felt that they took sides in a case where they had no evidence to know who was lying, but they just decided that because Lucas Richard is one of their own, they sided with him. Because if you read what they said and what Lucas Richard also told the police, it's very consistent. So it meant they had just taken his story to be true. But what about the alleged victim whose throat had allegedly been slit by your fellow Christian of your church and missionary? It shows respect that you should have just stayed on the fence and waited for the facts to come out instead of rushing to conclude Lucas Richard was innocent. That is my view, and a lot of people share this view. So the church was receiving a lot of backlash, and I think it's in the right place. Because when a human life is at stake, you don't have to come in and try to do chronism and partiality based on relationships you have with people involved in the case. That is not right. That is not right. And after several backlashing, the church now came back, and this is what they are now writing on their Facebook page. On September 14th, Creekside was made aware of a situation involving one of the missionaries we support, Lucas Richard, in Liberia. The information we received from his wife, who was serving with him in Liberia, was that Lucas was attacked and robbed. So we posted an urgent prayer request for our congregation. News later broke that Lucas had been incarcerated and accused of the attempted murder and aggravated assault of a Liberian girl, Jessica Lloyd. He maintains his innocence. Lucas is not a member of Creekside, but of an unaffiliated church in Liberia, which has its own leadership board. A social media post calling for prayer made it seem to the Liberian community that we are insensitive to the victim and appearing to defend the accused and by extension dismiss his charges. This was not the case. But I think that, and I've stopped quoting, these are my 2 cents before I continue. This impression was created by their post, and I'm happy they themselves are alluding to it, and I think they should have known better. I think they actually know better, but they are coming back to backtrack in this post, seeing that what they tried to pull did not work. Because it's one thing, an incident that happened, but it's another thing if you come out as a third party standing somewhere and you start drawing conclusions that the person you know is innocent just because someone who knows him has said something. You should already anticipate there'll be bias based on the source of that information to you. So it serves you best to sit on the fence and wait for the facts to come out. And I hope they will use this as a learning curve, because it's not right, especially in the type of institution that they are. They shouldn't mingle in legal issues where they have no evidence to draw a conclusion on something. And I think it's also very disrespectful to the victim. So this was where they got to in their post. And then I continue. This was not the case. Prayer is our first priority when confronted with a situation such as this. The church is sensitive to Jessica, who also accuses Lucas Richard of perpetrating the act. For her sake, and in light of our relationship with the Richards, it is always our obligation to seek the truth, a task made more difficult considering that the eyewitness accounts are radically different. We trust the legal system in Liberia to find the truth and render justice regarding the allegations. Yeah, let me speak to this too. And I talked about this earlier in this video that I'm hoping that the sensationalism and the court of public opinion out there does not affect the legal process. Because Lucas Richard, irrespective of what anybody is alleged to have seen him doing, is actually presumed innocent until proven guilty, beyond reasonable doubt for that matter. So nobody can rob him of that right, irrespective of how sensational the whole issue is. Because I trust you, trust you me, some people already pent up with emotions and all, and the moment they hear the story, they just jump in, let's protest, this and that and that. But the truth is the truth. If at the end of the day, evidence stacked up against him and facts out there corroborates and investigations conclude that he is guilty, definitely the law should then take its course. If not, and he is not guilty, he should be released, irrespective of how the larger percentage of the population feels. The law is the law. These are my 2 cents. Sorry if I'm not being sensational against Lucas Richard, but that doesn't mean I don't respect the victim too. I'm just speaking from an objective point of view. Now, their post continues. Sadly, we have confirmed today through an eyewitness from Liberia that Lucas had in fact entered into a second marriage with Jessica, which neither we nor his wife had any prior knowledge of. While there are many points of allegations we cannot confirm, since the extramarital relationship has been verified, this alone makes Lucas ineligible to represent our church or receive our support. We are continuing to work with the State Department, contacts in Liberia, and others to seek both truth and justice. Please continue to join us in prayer for all involved. So now they are praying for all involved. That should have been the first thing to do. You don't single out some people, pray for them and leave the others, thinking they are one of your own. And I don't see why you should stop working or stop working with Lucas Richard just because he has gotten into a second marriage. You know, they are saying that while there are many points of allegations, since this extramarital relationship has been verified, this alone makes Lucas ineligible to represent our church or receive our support. I have a problem with that post. I don't have a problem if you don't want him to represent you based on what he has done. But to receive your support, I think you have to continue to do that. The church, in my view, is there for sinners. He is one of you guys and he has sinned. This is not the time to forsake him. You can decide not to allow him to continue to represent you because of his morals that have been seemingly corrupted, but then you cannot deny him your support. You need to support him. He has fallen, he has backtracked. Help him. Don't neglect him. That is my view, and well, I'm no pastor. This is my objective view. Now, the case is ongoing, and to show how serious it is, the Ministry of Justice of the Republic of Liberia has also come out to issue a publication, and this was what they said. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed that Lucas Richard, the American citizen accused of slitting Jessica Lloyd's throat, was arraigned before the Bushrod Island Magistral Court on charges of criminal attempt to commit murder and aggravated assault. Defendant Lucas Richard was duly processed and remanded to the Monrovia Central Prison to await trial. This has been signed off by the Director of Press and Publicity for the Ministry of Justice. So at this point, Lucas Richard is just up in it, honestly. And like I said, I don't see any way out for him. I'm happy that Jessica Lloyd is also making a recovery and has actually been able to come out and talk. So at least her life was saved, irrespective of whether they were attacked in a robbery or whether Lucas Richard was trying to take her life himself. At least she is also alive. I'm waiting to see how this will play out. I'm waiting to see how the foreign authorities in Lucas Richard's country will also come into the fray because he is not a Liberian national. So this involves an international dialogue of a sort, although the law of Liberia seems to have caught him in its net. He's still not a Liberian national, so I think that at a point there will be a conversation between Liberia and the US. I don't know, but that's what my layman mind is thinking. And I'm waiting to see how this plays out. But as I promised, I'm following this case. As and when there are any updates, as I've brought you this, I'm definitely going to bring you those as well. Subscribe if you are yet to do so. What do you think is going to happen to Lucas Richards? Let me know in the comment section. Keep yourself safe. Keep an eye out. I'll catch you next time.